Oh my goodness. I am so excited for our conversation today. We're going to be talking about what are some of the things that hold us back from really leaning into our wellness journey. So, kind of to lay a foundation for you, both Melissa and I have walked our own heavy, if you want to say it that way, road to recovery, right? And it's something that we work on every day. But it's also something that has given us such returns. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about like Melissa works in she's a mental health professional as well as a dance instructor, has her own studio, plus she has a couple other ventures going on, especially one in Arbonne that really provides good products to folks that were looking for, skincare, makeup, all the different things. And I'm not a professional there, but, and she can tell you more about that. But, for her to be able to live her life to the fullest, she had to be well. She has to be well, or at least working, getting so close to it. And for myself, when I was so sick with MS, I was literally looking at potentially not even being alive by the time I was 50. So it's like for us, we had to make the decision to start our wellness journey, or we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Yep. Yep. I think that's such a valuable thing to say, Melissa, because I think so many people, it's funny, like I know this happened to me even in my networking group. I'm constantly talking about gut health and better choices.
Mm-hmm.
And, people, we eat lunch together.
Mm-hmm.
And I always order something very different than the rest of the crew, right? And, people just assume like I've always operated this way. And I'm like, and so I actually had done a presentation a couple months back about where I came from, because
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's easy for folks to see where you're at now, or,
Exactly.
and think to themselves, oh, how do I get there? And I know we've used the analogy before of like, it's like the tip of an iceberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you keep learning more. And as you know better, we can do better. And, I know you really were like, let's talk about some of the roadblocks people have
Mm-hmm.
around this. And, I think from a psychological standpoint, our brains desire comfort,
Mm-hmm.
even if those habits are uncomfortable. And it's
Mm-hmm.
something I talk a lot about with clients, because as soon as we start making changes, right,
Mm.
our internal programming is like, whoa, wait a minute, what are
Yeah.
we doing, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's true in regards to any area, whether it's food changes,
Mm-hmm.
habit changes, workout changes. And it's part of the reason. Now, here's a fascinating thing. Lots of folks go, I struggle with consistency, and they don't realize most people struggle with consistency. And if they realize that getting disciplined in whatever area it is the gateway to whatever goal they have,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much freedom in that
Mm-hmm.
discipline, right? Even though in their brain initially it feels restricting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they focus on what they can't do versus what they can do, right? And what it's going to create for them. So for you and I, we both had these tumultuous health journeys. You were looking at like, I don't know if I'm going to survive. I was looking at, I don't know if I want to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
when you start to feel better
Mm-hmm.
and make different choices, you start to realize, oh, I got a whole lot of life left, and I'm grateful for that, right? And I want to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also you start to realize like, okay, this actually keeps getting easier the more disciplined I get and the better choices I'm making, right? And so, I guess like an example for folks listening, like, so I had to first cut out corn. That was the first allergy I realized I had, right? Then from there, I discovered I have a real intolerance and bigger issue with gluten. Then from there, it was like, okay, now I'm going to cut out dairy. And so now people that meet me now know that like I don't do any of those things. I also cut out refined sugar. I cut out, don't do any chemical dyes
Mm-hmm.
and fragrance and blah blah. But it's like it starts in sections. And so I think that can certainly feel overwhelming for folks, but you have to decide
Mm-hmm.
kind of what's the first rung of my ladder,
Yeah.
right? And then understand that you're going to be challenged along the way, right? So say you make the choice that, you know, like for me, I meal prep every week. That's a non-negotiable so that I have clean
Mm-hmm.
food to eat, right? So I make the choice to, do a turkey breast in the crock pot. That's like one of my main sources of protein every week. But if I don't do that, I know I put myself in a position to make a more challenging choice.
Yeah.
Like, whatever that might look like, right?
Yeah.
So sure, it takes a little bit of time to prepare, but for me, it's the outcome is I don't have to make a harder choice. And then, or you're like, I don't have anything to eat. Like, what am I having for lunch? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people have to realize, like, sure, it's going to shift some of your habits, but
Mm-hmm.
then it alleviates so much of the frustration and aggravation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think one of the questions that, if I can kind of lead off of that just a little bit, is that, and I had this conversation with a lot of new clients or clients that are just thinking about joining us and working with our team, is this going to work for me? And that's a really huge question, right? Because I remember when I started my journey, I had been thoroughly indoctrinated by, the teams of doctors that I had been tested by, and, all the research and everything, that there was no coming back from multiple sclerosis,
Yeah,
period.
that sentence.
Right? And I had literally started down the grieving process of grieving the fact that I wasn't going to get to see my kids graduate. I
Mm,
wasn't going to be a part of their lives, right? So I'd literally, because I believed that so deeply, I'd given up. And so when the option came, thank God it came, to start addressing what was happening in my body from a full spectrum, it was like, well, not going to hurt to try. Let's see what happens. Right. And so I fully get that question. And for me on this side, understanding how absolutely crazy amazing our bodies are and how we can actually thoroughly heal from some of these really scary things. I know that, but the client doesn't know that yet. And so a lot of times that is a big question, and it is like digging deep and going down and going, you know what? Because all of us, I don't care who you are or where you're at, all of us, when we get quiet and we dig down and go, can I be well? If we're listening, our bodies and our minds, our intuition, whatever you want to say, our hearts immediately go,
yeah. Well, and I think too, I love that question because I think, what we realize is so many, trying not to crap on the medical industry, but I'm gonna, sorry. So I think we get sold a lot of fear, right?
yeah,
So, and the fear is what keeps us locked into these old habits. Like I can't get off my medication because,
mm,
how our dietary change is actually going to get rid of my pain. Or, and every journey, by the way, you guys, looks long when we're at the beginning of it, right? I mean,
yeah,
I always say Arbonne's a microcosm of life. So it's kind of like when people start and they're like, do you really think I can do this? I'm like, of course you can. But you got to look at it like a marathon. It's not a sprint, right?
yeah,
And that's the path to recovery from any physical ailment too,
mm-hmm,
is that. And
yeah,
understanding, you know, like I'm still tightening up my game, right? And so, like, how do we keep doing that? And so I think that people have to, the first question is always, do you want something different than what you have?
exactly.
Right. And if you are, then you're going to have to do something that you've not been doing.
Yeah,
Right. And so, in order for folks to really wrap their brain around that, I think that's where you've got to start.
yeah,
Because I do believe where there's a will, there's a way, right? Like, it's a really old saying.
mm-hmm,
And then, yeah, you're going to do some things that might feel unconventional or feel different. Like I know I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, gone through some medical stuff, and, you know, she may not always understand my journey. That's okay. Right. I just know I'm doing what's right for me. Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I can't force anyone to understand that. I just know that that's what helps me feel better, helps me do better,
Mhm.
and helps me operate best in my life. Right.
Yeah.
But I think if you're out there and you're struggling and you're like, is this going to work for me? I think the real answer to that is, do you want something different?
Exactly.
Because if you do, and you're willing to do something different, then you're going to have a very different outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. But it has to start with what you want right here.
Oh, 100%. Well, and I think also understanding that it's not going to be easy, right? Like there's always going to be, I mean, I come from like a faith-based worldview, right? So I know that when I'm going for big things sometimes or things are shifting, I may be met with more challenges because the enemy's trying to get me to be like, yeah, I can't do this. I'm going to stop, right? So it's that way, I think, in most things when we're trying to make big changes. You are gonna reach some things that are gonna go, is this gonna work? Is this okay? Okay, what do you mean I'm gonna have a salad for lunch instead of like 3 slices of pizza? Like, whatever, right? Um, but once you start to make those changes and see how you're feeling,
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. But I do think it's reminding yourself that, fear is keeping you locked in a place you don't want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me when I first started was the fear,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you
Well,
know?
I can clearly remember, like, even as we're talking, I'm thinking about like when I decided, well, not decided, but wanted to get off all my like migraine medications.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like terrified. Like, what if these headaches get worse? But I also felt like such junk
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, I also can't keep doing this.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that's where I think a lot of folks are in that limbo,
Yeah. Yeah.
feeling really lousy, tired of whatever doctors are telling them. And I really do laugh. I'm sure you do too. Some of the things people tell me, like, oh, my doctor told me not to take ginseng. Why? Like, or,
Yeah.
like, and there's never any real clout to that. Or, doctors like, well, I don't, I had a friend tell me recently that doctors had said to her, there's no proof that those supplements are going to work, but I guess worst case scenario, you have really expensive pee.
I've heard that one so much.
And I was
Oh.
like, and what I read actually, someone I, love to kind of look to the other day was sharing like that traditional medicine is actually alternative medicine, right? Herbal medicine is where medicine began.
Yeah.
And I think people really have to wrap their brain around that we used to not eat all this processed crap. We used to eat whole real food. You look at people from like the 50s, they're not like overweight. They look healthy, like before we just started ramming prescriptions down everyone's face and all this processed food. Like I remember when TV dinners came out, right?
Right.
My mom
Yeah.
was like, probably horrified by them, and we got to have one if she was like going out, like, but I thought it was so exciting as a kid because of course it tasted lovely to me at that time. It was disgusting, right? But like it was also just something different, right? But now we've gone so far the other way. It's like, if you cook real food and don't, just pull your meal out of a box, it's like bizarre to some folks.
Yeah. I think this is a good conversation in that so many of us are at different stages of our journey. And a lot of us are at the very beginning. We're starting to realize that, like you were saying, we don't want to continue where we're at. We need to change something because if we don't, the end result is not what we want. Like, I didn't want to be dead by 50.
Right. Right.
You know, if that were so, I'd have 3 more years.
Right. Right.
You know, no thanks. I plan on being very well fit and around as long as I get to be. And, you know, I'm going to dance at my kid's wedding.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. So, you know, if you're watching this, you guys, and you are like, I don't know where to start, you know, Melissa's a great
Yeah.
place to start, and then I can certainly support. But you are going to have to work on your mindset around wellness too.
Mhm.
That's a big thing because,
Yeah.
you know, and as we know, Melissa, sometimes it gets a little worse before it gets better, right? As you're really,
Sometimes.
no, not always, you guys. You know, a lot of times you
Mhm.
have some immediate relief, especially around food changes, I would say.
Yeah.
But then as you're starting to heal some bigger stuff, you know, there might be some other things that kind of kicks up. But again,
Mhm.
you've got to keep reminding yourself that the goal is to get on the other side and how much better
Yeah.
you're going to feel.
Exactly. I love that. Reach out, you guys, if you need some support, and we will talk with you next week.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.